call the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak in regards to the interim report tabled on behalf of the Joint Select Committee on Australia's family law system, of which I am a member. Deputy Speaker, the reality of modern society, sadly, is that 40% of marriages end in divorce. While many of those separations are conducted fairly and amicably, there are still many Australians who rely on the family law system to settle their divorce and resolve disputes over property and custody of children. Most of us know someone who has gone through the family law courts or who have experienced it firsthand ourselves. To various degrees, this process can be adversarial, confrontational, emotionally unsettling, financially crippling and life-changing. It's for that reason that it's imperative that our family law system is not only functional, but is fair and well-funded. It's for that reason that this report and this inquiry is important. At this stage, I want to commend the government for its budget announcement that it will inject $35.7 million over 4 years for resourcing and judicial numbers in the Federal Circuit Court. This is important, and I acknowledge the overall investment of a projected $132.1 million aimed at expediting the handling of family law and other matters over the same period. This is an important first step, and I thank the government for addressing this urgent need for resourcing. Deputy Speaker, when this inquiry was first announced, I, like many others, was sceptical. It should be noted that there have been 67 different inquiries into the Family Law Act since it came into effect in January 1976. That should be nearly a record. The most recent of these was the Australian Law Reform Commission report handed down in March 2019, entitled Family Law for the Future, an inquiry into the family law system. And the report contains 60 different recommendations on how to improve the system. Sadly, some 18 months on, the government is yet to release its response to that report, and I, of course, use this opportunity to call on the government to do so and urgently implement the full list of recommendations. Unfortunately, there is a history of successive inquiries identifying similar systemic problems with our family law system and successive governments being unwilling or unable to make the necessary changes. So, Deputy Speaker, when this Joint Select Inquiry was announced, I hoped that maybe this time would be different. I hoped that this inquiry would lead to that fair and fully funded system we so desperately need. When I nominated as a member, not just to represent the interest of my constituents in Warringah, many of whom have gone through the family law system, but also to bring to the process my experience and knowledge as a family law barrister prior to entering this Parliament. Now, that was over a year ago. On the 24th of this month will in fact mark exactly 12 months since we first met as a committee charged with the responsibility of improving the family law system. In those 12 months, we've received more than 1,600 submissions, the majority from individuals detailing their personal cases and experiences, and another 169 submissions from organisations, academics and other professionals. Despite the various challenges, of course, of COVID-19, we've held 11 public hearings and 13 in-camera hearings. So it's important at this stage that I thank all the people who took time to provide to the committee with a submission or to appear at one of our hearings. It's vitally important that we hear from those who have had first-hand experience with the system, those who are seeking to improve it, and for those who have the skills and expertise in the law, in child protection and in community services. I really thank everyone for their contribution. The terms of reference for this inquiry were very broad and far-reaching. They covered from interaction of the family law system to state and territory jurisdictions, the appropriateness of the family court powers and enforcement, the proposed merger of the family court and the Federal Circuit Court, the financial costs and impacts to families in the process, the effectiveness and enforcement of the family law outcomes, and the support available throughout that process and services to families, the family dispute resolution processes, and then ultimately the impacts of family law proceedings on health, safety and well-being of children and families involved in those proceedings. Of course, it also dealt with issues arising for grandparents, carers in the family law system, and in relation to monitoring of professionals involved in family law proceedings. There was, of course, a very far-ranging areas and scope for this inquiry. And on the whole, I feel that the issues covered in this interim report before the House are consistent with those terms of reference, but also my own experience as a family law barrister. The interim report has not made recommendations, but it has set out the breadth of the evidence that's been received and the areas covered. And these have been very broad. But I should say first off that the committee is not in a position to determine the truth of the facts alleged and set out before it during hearings or in submissions. We are simply and very frequently only hearing from one side of a story. And so while some may feel that it's a question of forming a judgment, that is not the role of the committee. It was simply to gather the experiences and identify where some of the problems, and then take on board the submissions from some of the professional organisations that work in the space. It's clear the family law system has a huge impact on people's lives, and some of the areas that were brought to our attention were very much the challenges in engaging with the legal system. The family law system is often the very first time a person is having to engage with the court process, so it can be incredibly confronting and debilitating as your most personal situation is laid bare before a court and often put in the hands of somebody else to determine. This can be incredibly confronting and challenging. Parenting arrangements, enforcements, allegations of alienations of parents, legal costs, mediation, dispute resolution, these were all major issues covered. Now, we can't talk about breakdown of families without talking about domestic violence. It is a scourge in our society and must be addressed. We heard a lot of evidence in relation to domestic violence and how it interacts with the family law system and engages at all levels. There were issues in relation, points raised around systemic issues when it came to costs, qualifications, consultants, expert witnesses. Of course, the adversarial nature of the system being an inquisitor, was also brought up. The question of should we move to a more inquisitorial system is something that has been explored. Legal fees and costs are often raised, but these are also often tied to the length and time that it takes for proceedings to be dealt with. This, of course, all comes back to fully funding the courts to be able to deal in a timely manner with disputes in a fair and balanced way. I look forward to working with the committee to continue the inquiry and work at developing, I would hope, some recommendations that will in fact deal with a lot of the issues that were raised before the committee. As I said, I think this interim report is promising, that the inquiry is on the right track to formulating some clear recommendations for how the family law system in Australia can be improved. But those recommendations are useless unless the government commits to implementing them. So I do look for that assurance from the government that they will fully implement the recommendations of last year's report from the Australian Law Reform Commission and will fully implement the recommendations of this report. Australian families deserve a legal system that is fair and fully funded. I look forward to working with my fellow committee members from both sides of the aisle and with the government to achieve that outcome. In conclusion, we're all aware that COVID-19 pandemic has created added pressure on relationships that were possibly already under stress. It's really important for everyone. Support services and welfare agencies all report an increase in people seeking help for either mental health issues or family violence. So to anyone in a situation where they feel their relationship is causing mental distress, please reach out. Lifeline 131 114, Beyond Blue 1800 512 348. And if you are in a situation of family violence, or if you are worried about someone who is in a situation where there might be intimidation, controlling behaviour or harassment or physical violence, whether they be male or female, please call 1800-RESPECT, that's 1800 737 732, or Men's Line Australia 1300 789 878. Thank you.
I thank the honourable